Welcome to the second episode in my Hearts of Iron 4 Naval Guide. In the first video, I've gone over the naval strategy in general and the various mission types. Today, before we get into the nitty-gritty of things like ship designs, we are going to be looking at an actual combat scenario in order to understand what naval combat's looking like, how it functions, and how we can design ships for different scenarios. So let's get on with it. The situation in September 1939 in the Pacific is as follows. We have set up a somewhat contrived scenario. We've got the 5th Fleet under Halsey stationed in Guam. And the 5th Fleet consists of 4 fleet carriers, Saratoga, Lexington, Yorktown, Enterprise, as well as a sufficient screening force, both of battleships as well as light cruisers and destroyers. Most of our ships are relatively new to this game, so there's a fair few of inexperienced crews in here. They are here to counter Japanese forces in the region, and we have a second group, which is a scouting force, which consists mostly of Pensacola-class heavy cruisers. These ships are not ideal, but it is what we've got to work with. So if we're looking at the design, these ships actually have airplane catapults. We don't really have radars yet to great effect. So this is what we have to work with. The surface detection is okay. It's not great. Could be better. But and yes, they are heavy cruisers. So we definitely don't want them to be engaged because they're sailing without screens. The reason they're sailing without screens is that the naval scouting missions depend on the average surface detection. And if we put ships in that don't have catapults, like destroyers, which can't have catapult fighters or seaplanes, then that'll lower the average surface detection of the group and all in all reduce the efficiency. So make sure that all ships in the group have ideally the same value of surface detection. We could sail single ships here for what it's worth, but this gives them a little bit more firepower in case they encounter something that they can actually perform a fighting retreat from. But we're definitely sending them at low risk in order to not engage. Their task is to find enemy shipping. Now, 2 cruisers in a whole sea region isn't going to do an awful lot. So for that, we actually have a few air wings. We've got 4 naval patrol wings. These are PB2Y Coronados. So these are actually large aircraft. We can have a very brief look at the design. It's a relatively simple design. For naval patrol missions, we just simply need torpedoes on these. They're not meant to actually engage because they will be flying in groups of 10. Plus, these are large airframes, so they're reasonably expensive. And because it's a relatively early variant, I've actually put extra fuel tanks to get the range up to allow them to actually cover the region. So what these air wings are doing is they will be on the naval patrol mission. The naval patrol mission only works if you actually have ships on naval patrol. So this would do absolutely nothing if we didn't have the scouting force committed to the same region. And this boosts the performance of the scouts simply by finding enemy ships from the air and then reporting in with Fleet Command and with the scouts in order to improve that. Without that, these ships probably wouldn't be doing a great job of scouting. But with the help of the air wings, they will hopefully do somewhat better. So we've got three air wings deployed to the Mariana region because it's by air wing. How many air wings are deployed increases how well the scouting mission gets buffed, and we've sent one to the Philippine Sea simply because we assume that once we declare war on Japan, the Japanese fleet will sally forth from the home islands in order to defend the outer defense ring. And we have the 5th Fleet assigned to the same fleet regions, so both fleets assigned to the regions. 5th Fleet is on strike force, so it doesn't sail around burning fuel, while the cruisers are out scanning for the Japanese. So let us declare war on Japan, and then we will see if we can actually manage to spot a Japanese task group that might be coming in through this region towards the Carolines or towards the Marshall Islands. A situation update. After some movement, the scout cruisers have not managed to actually catch a carrier force that has made its way over south to the Carolines, and this comes as a surprise now to the American ships. But there's a group of Japanese light ships that has been 9 destroyers that has been spotted, and the 5th Fleet is moving. These have been scouted by Scouting Group 4. That's the list of destroyers, and Task Force 5.1 is now moving to engage. Now this obviously is going to, if they can catch them, is going to trigger a battle, which is likely going to cause the enemy carrier group that is located in the Carolines here to engage as well. So you always have to be careful when you are sending your ships out if there's actually something else in the region. So our carriers are now chasing this destroyer group, and we'll see if they can manage to catch them. And now battle has been met. So we've got here we've got the battle screen. So we may as well just quickly go through it and see what happens now. So these 9 destroyers have been caught by the combined scouting group and air scouting groups. They are obviously massively outgunned and outnumbered. They have a positioning advantage because it's the smaller fleet. So it takes just a longer time for the rest of our ships to get everything in order. We've got 3 lanes of battle on each side. So that's our side, that's the enemy side, obviously. We've got the first group, which is the screening group. This is the sort of outer ring and scouting line. So we're talking about defenses mostly against torpedoes, which means that if a destroyer, which is a rather mobile ship, can spot enemy torpedoes in the water, they can warn the more heavy ships in the main line to start evading, which takes them a little bit longer. So this group guards that group guards this group. That's sort of the alignment. So we've got everything that's capital ships, so battleships, battle cruisers, heavy cruisers in the second line. We've got everything that's screening, so light cruisers and destroyers in the first line, and we've got the carriers in the third line in the rear. Submarines, if there were any present, would be underwater down here. And the first engagement is likely going to be between the screening groups. Now, the positioning means that initially, while we're still sorting everything out, our ships are going to have disadvantages, whereas these ships, due to better positioning, will not get these debuffs. But they are so massively outgunned that it's not going to make a massive difference. So slow that a little bit down and see what's actually happening. One more word on shots fired. So these ships have light guns, only light guns, which means they can only engage the enemy screening group. These ships have light and heavy guns, which means that they can actually engage across as well. And obviously the carriers are going to launch aircraft, but the sorting is going to take them a while to sort out as well. So these ships are most likely going to turn tail. But what we're seeing now here is we're seeing the first Kantai of Japan with 3 fleet carriers, 6 capital ships, and a fair amount of screening ships to join battle as well. Because they were on strike force, and now that we have engaged their destroyers have radioed for help, and that group is now coming to join the battle that has been stationed on the Carolines. So we should see them starting to come in relatively soon. Now, the initial naval bomber strike going through has actually sunk one of the destroyers, and the rest of them is running away. Now the question is, can they run away before the enemy battle group is joining? And by the looks of it, they have all been sunk. All 9 destroyers have been sunk. So the battle is over, which means that the enemy carrier group is not going to join this battle. It might still intercept our battle if the carriers be on the way back, because our carriers are going to return and the enemy carrier group was in the region. So we'll see if there's still interception happening or if we were successful in this battle overall. And the 2 forces now have joined battle near Truk. So at this point, we have a somewhat more balanced makeup here. We've got 4 fleet carriers versus 3 carriers, and we've got 2 heavy cruisers and 6 battleships versus 4 battleships and 2 battle cruisers. And the screening forces are relatively similar as well. So in that case, our positioning is going to be about the same, and we can compare. We have much more firepower on the light guns. We have comparable firepower in the heavy guns, but the Japanese have the definite advantage in terms of torpedoes, whereas we have the advantage in Fleet AA. And I would say all in all a relatively even battle. So let's see how this plays out. You can hover over the enemy ships, and see who is taking damage. And you see that some of these ships are already retreating. That means they have, as a whole, decided that they don't want to take this engagement. Now, what's going to happen is the screening group is sort of covering the retreat of the heavy forces. So our light forces are now going to decimate the enemy screening group. So we can see already here destroyers are being sunk. But if we're looking at the heavy ships, most of them have taken some damage, and you see they have taken damage from the heavy guns, and that's because the battle line here can fire across, or at the enemy with the heavy guns, can fire across at the enemy battle line over there. We also see that the USS California has taken a critical hit that is going to take a long time to repair, so that's a bit unfortunate. But we have done some damage, and we wouldn't be doing any direct damage to the carriers with the battleships unless the screening group here was gone. So the carriers are most likely going to make their way out. They have taken some damage from our bombers, however, whereas our carriers have gotten out scot-free so far. So in this kind of first engagement round, you're most likely, so carriers have escaped, you're most likely to sink or to wear down the enemy screening group as much as you can. While they are trying, you're not going to get to the heavy ships that easily. So in this case, they have lost, we'll see how many destroyers in the end they will lose. And here's the battle results screen. So they have lost 19 destroyers and 1 fighter, whereas we've lost 3 dive bombers and 2 destroyers on our side. So this has hurt them quite badly in the screening group, which means that this force is now significantly less effective because their screening ratio is reduced, which means that also that any subsequent engagements are going to be more effective because of the lower screening group. So it's not about sinking an enemy fleet. Obviously, ideally, if you can sink enemy capital ships, that'll be ideal. But forcing them back to port and rendering them combat ineffective because their screening groups are gone is actually an operational success by itself. And now you obviously have to evaluate your own ships. So, for example, we see that the USS Sterret is very heavily damaged, and a few of the other ships are not in a great shape either. So after a combat like this, it can actually be making sense to just send the whole group back for repairs to the next biggest naval base, and or rotate out with another task force. If you have a secondary task force, let's say over in Midway, that's available to replace it. So you can circle the first task force out, enact repairs, and then get the other one back in again. So and as you see, a lot of the ships now are starting to become significantly more experienced, which is going to increase the damage that they're dishing out, as well as reduces the amount of damage that they're going to take. So this is just one example of sort of major fleet combat. In a more realistic scenario, there would be submarines involved that are hunting convoys, and obviously convoy engagements would then often bring in the strike forces as well. But I hope that gives you a little bit of an impression of how ship combat works in general between major task groups. And as you can see, the AI builds kind of similar task forces. So around 50 ships with a carrier group at its core is a relatively good size. If you don't have any carriers or sufficient carriers, then just using capital ships as the core is not bad either. And most of these are relatively early ships. I haven't refitted anything here, but the power of the light force is not to be underestimated. So you see, we've got a fair amount of the Brooklyn class cruisers here on our side in the escort group, these light cruisers. And if we're looking at the design on these aren't bad. They have a relatively decent amount of light attack, and obviously could be improved. We don't need the aircraft catapult because we're simply not using these ships for scouting. We could, but they're much more effective as screening ships with the firepower that they have available. And wearing down the enemy screening force is the first step towards eventually eliminating the enemy task force altogether. Capital ships can be harder to catch and to sink as long as they still have screens, but don't be disheartened. That was a victory, and a major one, because it significantly reduces the amount of combat effectiveness that these kind of enemy task forces are having. We're sending ships in port to repair for a while. We are And we could potentially port strike if we know where they are for repairs. We could start port striking them. That's the other advantage of scouting. If we know where the enemy task force is, we can begin running port strikes from land-based aircraft without too much trouble. So there are a fair few ways of how you can go about this. But I hope this gives you a little bit of an impression on how naval combat works in practice. And next episode, we'll be looking at ship designs and how to build for purpose.